Don't, that's forbidden. The words tore out of Sarah Collins before she could stop them, sharp with fear and shame. For one suspended second, everything felt wrong. The heat, the silence, and the fact that Jack Miller's hands were right there, between her bound ankles, far closer than anyone would ever forgive. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story gets much more intense, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. From a distance, it would have looked unforgivable. Sarah hung upside down from the cottonwood tree, ropes biting into her skin, her skirts pulled toward her waist by gravity. Blood rushed to her head, making the world pulse and blur. The Arizona sun burned straight down, dust hanging in the air like it was holding its breath. Anyone watching would have seen a helpless woman and a rancher standing beneath her, alone, too close, with no witnesses brave enough to stay. Jack felt it too, the way the moment could be twisted, the way it already was. His hands were rough, cracked by years of work under the open sky. They tightened slightly as he adjusted his grip, trying to steady her swinging body. The rope creaked above them. Sarah gasped, the sound short and panicked, and turned her face away, eyes squeezed shut. "Please," she whispered. "That place you can't." She didn't need to explain. The rules had been drilled into her long before she understood what they truly meant. What was allowed? What was forbidden? What was used to control? What was used to punish? Jack shifted his boots in the dirt, jaw tight. To anyone still watching from a window or behind a tree, it would look like he had paused for the wrong reason. Like he was staring. Like he was taking advantage of the moment no one dared interrupt. That was exactly how Reverend Thomas Crow wanted it to look. Only minutes earlier, the preacher had stood with calm certainty and called this punishment righteous. A lesson, he said. A warning. The townspeople had backed away one by one. Even the deputy had turned his eyes aside. No one wanted to be part of it once the rope went up. Now there was only Jack, a man with no title, no collar, no scripture to protect him. Sarah's breath shook. Her voice came out softer this time, broken. "Please, don't let it happen like this." Jack finally spoke, his voice low and controlled. "Hold still." The words only made it worse. From the outside, it sounded like something else entirely. The dust swirled. The rope strained. Sarah braced herself, not for pain, but for disgrace. She knew how stories were made in towns like this. A glance became a lie. A rescue became a sin. For a heartbeat longer, Jack stayed where he was, hands steady, eyes fixed on a knot above her ankles. Then steel flashed in the sunlight. The rope snapped. The branch jerked. Sarah dropped hard into his arms, the impact knocking the breath from both of them. For one stunned second, she was pressed against his chest, heart racing, skirts tangled, nowhere to look but up into his face. Then Jack set her down, not roughly, not gently, just enough space to make it clear he hadn't crossed the line everyone expected him to. She tried to stand, her legs folded beneath her. "Easy," he said, reaching out before stopping himself. From a distance, even that could be misunderstood. The deputy cleared his throat. Reverend Crow didn't say a word. He smiled. Jack knew that smile. It was the kind that didn't need proof. It waited for rumors to do the work. He lifted Sarah onto his horse without ceremony, one arm under her knees, careful but close. She flinched when he touched her again, not because it hurt, but because she remembered how near his hands had been moments earlier. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "I know," Jack said. They rode out fast, dust rising behind them like something that wouldn't settle anytime soon. The horse moved beneath them in a steady rhythm, but Sarah felt every step like it echoed through her bones. Her hands clutched the saddle horn, knuckles pale, breath shallow. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The mission was already shrinking behind them, but the weight of it stayed pressed against her chest. Jack rode stiff, like a man afraid that one wrong movement would turn into another accusation. He kept his eyes forward, jaw set, one hand firm on the reins. The other hovered near her back without touching, as if even that much closeness might be used against him later. They didn't speak for a long while. The land opened up as they rode, cottonwoods thinning, the air cooling near the river. The dust settled. The world felt wider, quieter, less like it was watching. Sarah finally breathed out, long and shaky, like she'd been holding it for days instead of minutes. "My legs won't stop shaking," she said softly, more to the air than to him. "That'll pass," Jack replied. "Your body's still catching up." She swallowed. When you stood there, I thought maybe you wouldn't cut me down." He flinched just slightly. "Why would you think that?" "Because no one else did," she said. "Because they all walked away like it was nothing. Like I deserved it." Jack didn't answer right away. The horse snorted, ears flicking. The river moved alongside them, slow and indifferent. "I stayed because it was wrong," he said last. "That's all." Sarah nodded, but her fingers tightened. "That's never all," she said. "Not here." His ranch came into view just as the sun dipped lower, a simple place sitting quiet against the land. No white walls, no bells, just a porch, a wind pump, and shade that felt like mercy. Jack dismounted first, then reached up without asking and lifted her down. Her legs buckled again. This time he caught her. She stiffened, breath hitching, and he felt it. He eased his grip, but didn't let go completely. "I've got you," he said, plain and steady. "I won't let you fall." She believed him. That scared her more than the rope ever had. Inside the house, the air was cooler. Jack set her on a narrow bed and turned away at once, like he needed the space as much as she did. He brought water, clean cloth, and knelt to check the burns around her ankles. She watched him from the corner of her eye. Men like him weren't supposed to be careful. Not after what people said. Not after how things looked. She tensed when his fingers brushed too close to her skin. He noticed. "I'm not here for that," he said quietly, eyes down. "I never was." There was something tired in his voice, like he'd said those words before and no one had listened. For a moment, the room felt smaller. He could see more than she wanted him to. Heat, fear, the way her clothes had shifted during the ride. He paused, stood, and pulled a blanket over her knees without comment. That simple act confused her more than anything else. "You shouldn't have come back for me," she said after a while. "They'll talk." "They already are," he replied. "Talking doesn't scare me." She studied him then. The dust on his boots. The restraint in his hands. The way he looked like a man always standing one step away from being misunderstood. As her eyes grew heavy, one thought wouldn't let her rest. If he crossed lines so easily when no one was watching, what would he do when no one could stop him? The house settled into the kind of quiet that didn't mean peace, just stillness. The wind pump creaked outside, slow and tired, and somewhere in the dark a horse shifted its weight. Sarah lay on the narrow bed, eyes closed, breath finally even. Her face had softened in sleep, but her body stayed tense, like it didn't trust rest yet. Jack stood in the doorway longer than he should have. He wasn't watching her the way rumors would claim. He was listening. For pain. For fever. For any sign that leaving her alone would be the wrong choice. Men like him learned early that mistakes didn't always announce themselves. Sometimes they waited. She didn't stir. That's when he knew he couldn't stay. Jack moved quietly, pulling on his boots, saddling his horse without lighting a lantern. The moon gave enough light. It always had. He rode back, toward the mission with a tightness in his chest he didn't bother naming. Turning away had never sat right with him. Not when something fell off. Not when someone else paid the price. The church looked harmless at night. White walls. Long shadows. Silent, like it was holding its breath. Jack circled behind it, stopping near the small back building Reverend Crow had pointed earlier. The one he'd called forbidden. Jack stood there for a moment, listening. A dog barked somewhere beyond the chapel, then went quiet too fast. Jack waited. One breath. Two. Then he slipped along the wall where the moonlight didn't reach. The lock fought him. Metal scraped metal, loud enough that his whole body froze. He pressed his cheek to the wood, heart hammering, and waited. Footsteps crossed the yard inside, slow and careless, like someone who didn't expect trouble. Jack didn't move until they faded. He tried again, slower this time, careful like he was easing out a splinter. The lock finally gave with a sound that felt too loud in the quiet night. Inside, the air smelled wrong. Dust, old paper, and something sour that didn't belong in a place built for prayer. He didn't rush. Rushing was for men afraid of what they might find. There were ledgers on the table, names written neat, dates marked, amounts tallied, donations, fines, punishments. The same women's names appeared more than once, always followed by the same words in the same tight hand. Correction, discipline, lesson delivered. Jack swallowed. In the corner sat a box. Small things, a ribbon, a worn shoe, a prayer book with a page torn out. This was what forbidden meant. Not holy, hidden. He took what he could carry and left the rest exactly where it was. The ride back felt longer, not because of distance, but because every answer brought another question. When Jack stepped inside his house, Sarah was awake. She didn't ask where he'd been. She didn't have to. You looked anyway, she said softly. Someone had to, he replied. Outside, a horse snorted. Somewhere down by the river, a dog barked, then went quiet again. Morning didn't come gently. Sarah woke before the sun, body stiff, ankles aching where the rope had burned her skin. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the smell of coffee drifted in from the other room, and memory rushed back hard enough to make her sit up. Jack was already awake. She wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders and stood slowly, testing her weight like she didn't trust her legs yet. The floor was cool under her feet. Through the open doorway, she saw him at the table, shoulders hunched slightly, staring down at the papers spread before him like they might bite. He looked up when he heard her. You should be resting. I slept enough, she said. Then, after a beat, those are from the mission. He didn't deny it. They won't stay hidden now. Sarah lowered herself into the chair across from him. Her hands shook, and she hated that they did. You didn't have to do that. Yes, he said simply. I did. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt heavier than the night before. Finally, she reached out and touched the edge of one page, then pulled her hand back like it burned. They'll come, she said. He won't let this go. Jack nodded. I know. She studied his face then. The bruising already forming along his jaw from years of small fights and big choices. A man used to standing alone, but not immune to fear. You could still walk away, she said. No one would blame you. I would, he replied. The sound of horses came before they were visible. Leather creaking, hooves measured and slow, like the riders wanted to be seen, but not rushed. Sarah felt it in her chest before Jack even stood. He knows, she said quietly. Jack stepped onto the porch. 3 riders stopped short of the fence. Reverend Thomas Crow stayed mounted, hands resting easy, smile already in place like it had been practiced. You should have left things where they were, Crow called out. This didn't need to become ugly. You tied her to a tree, Jack said. It was already ugly. Crow chuckled, shaking his head like Jack was a child who didn't understand how the world worked. People get ideas when they see things they shouldn't. The deputy shifted in his saddle, eyes flicking anywhere but the house. Crow dismounted slowly, gaze drifting toward the open doorway, then back to Jack. I came for what's mine, he said, and for what you took. Jack felt the weight of the papers inside his coat. Sarah saw his shoulders square, the way men do when they know there's no clean way out. The first punch didn't come from Crow. It came fast from the man behind him. Jack tasted blood and staggered, boots digging into the dirt to keep from going down. Another body rushed in. The fence rattled. Dust filled the air. Sarah didn't scream. She grabbed the lantern from the table, hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She stumbled into the doorway, heart pounding so loud she couldn't hear anything else. For a second, she thought she might fall. Then she threw it. Glass shattered. Oil spilled. Fire climbed up fast, heat pushing everyone back. Sarah's strength vanished all at once. Her knees folded beneath her. Jack saw her fall, then nearly got him killed. A fist slammed into his ribs, hard enough to make him grunt, but he didn't move away from her. He shoved the man back with one arm and pulled Sarah behind it with the other, placing himself between her and everything else. Crow's smile vanished. This is what happens when women forget their place, he snapped. Sarah lifted her chin, voice shaking but clear. No, she said. This is what happens when men hide behind God. Everything happened too fast and not fast enough. Jack moved without thinking. He drove his shoulder into Crow, knocking the preacher backward into the dirt. Crow's hat rolled away, landing face down like it had finally learned shame. The men with him hesitated, suddenly unsure if they were enforcing order or standing on the wrong side of it. The deputy froze. He looked at Crow on the ground, dust clinging to that clean collar, one cheek already swelling. Something shifted in the deputy's face. Not courage exactly, more like relief. "I didn't sign on for this," he muttered. He didn't draw his weapon. He backed his horse up instead, slow and careful, like he wanted distance from the moment more than justice. When it was over, the yard went quiet again. Not peaceful, just waiting. Jack stood there breathing hard, side aching where a fist had landed. His hands shook now that the danger had passed, and he hated that too. Crow lay on the ground, laughing once, thin and bitter. "You think they'll believe you?" Crow said. "You think the town will take your word over mine?" Sarah stepped forward before Jack could answer. Her legs felt weak, but she stayed upright. She reached into Jack's coat with steady hands and pulled out the ledger. The paper felt heavier than it should have. "They will," she said, "because they already suspect." The men who had come with Crow shifted again, eyes on the pages, on the fire, still burning low in the dirt. One of them finally grabbed Crow by the arm and hauled him toward the saddle. As they dragged him away, Crow twisted just enough to look back at Jack. The smile returned, quieter this time, meaner. "If you think this is finished," he said softly, "you don't know what I'm willing to burn." The sound of hooves faded. Sarah's knees finally gave out. Jack caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her carefully like she weighed something precious instead of broken. "It's over," he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. She shook her head against his shoulder. "No," she whispered. "It's just started." The night closed in again, smoke drifting upward, truth hanging in the air like it didn't know where to settle. Jack looked down at her, at the woman who had been silenced for too long, and felt the weight of what choosing to look had cost them both. Neither of them slept much after that. The town didn't change overnight, but it shifted in small, uncomfortable ways. People started stopping their conversations when Sarah walked past. Some looked away too fast. Others held her gaze a second longer than they used to, like they were seeing her for the first time and didn't know what to do with that. No one apologized. They never did, but silence spoke louder than words ever had. Sarah felt exposed without her old routines. No bell telling her when to wake, when to pray, when to keep her thoughts to herself. Freedom sounded simple until she had it. Then it felt heavy, like something she might drop if she didn't hold it right. At night, sleep came and went. Some nights, she woke with her heart racing, fingers curling like they were still tied. Other nights, she lay awake listening to the quiet, waiting for it to turn on her. Jack never asked questions in those moments. He just stayed close enough that she knew she wasn't alone, far enough that she didn't feel trapped. One evening, she finally spoke. "What if they were right about me?" she asked, staring at the floor. "What if I really am someone who needs rules to keep from doing wrong?" Jack thought about it before answering. "Rules don't make people good," he said. "They just make things easier to control." She nodded slowly. "I was taught that wanting was the same as sin." "Wanting's just wanting," he said. "What you do with it is the part that matters." She looked at him, then really looked, not as a rescuer, not as a threat, just a man who had chosen discomfort over comfort. "Why'd you go back that night?" she asked. "You could have left." Jack leaned back his chair, eyes on the ceiling. "Because I've been the guy who looked away before," he said. "Didn't like who I was after." The town tried to return to normal. The mission doors stayed closed. The deputy avoided questions. Crow's name was spoken less and less, which somehow said more than shouting ever could. People didn't want to admit what they'd ignored. Admitting meant responsibility. Sarah began helping around the ranch, slow at first. Her hands blistered. She laughed when she wasn't supposed to. The sound surprised her every time, like it belonged to someone else. She was learning her own weight, her own voice, the space she took up in the world. One afternoon, she stood at the fence Jack had fixed and ran her fingers over the wood. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Looking any way?" Jack shook his head. "I regret the times I didn't." That night, the wind moved through the cottonwoods, soft and steady. Sarah sat on the porch steps, wrapped in Jack's coat. watching the stars appear one by one. She realized something then that settled deep in her chest. Courage hadn't arrived all at once. It came in pieces, in staying, in speaking, in choosing not to shrink anymore. And for the first time, she believed that might be enough. The sun came up slow the next morning, pale light spreading across the ranch like it didn't want to disturb what had happened. The yard still smelled faintly of smoke. One fence rail lay crooked where a body had hit it. Everything else looked the same, and somehow that felt wrong. Sarah stood barefoot on the porch, toes curling against the warm wood. The river moved in the distance, steady and unconcerned, like it always had. For the first time in a long while, she noticed how quiet her breathing was. No flinch, no waiting for someone to shout her name. Jack leaned against the porch post, coffee cooling in his hand. He hadn't slept much. Every sound in the night had pulled him halfway awake, body ready before his mind caught up. He set the mug down, shrugged off his old, sun-faded coat, and draped it over Sarah's shoulders without a word. She looked down at it, then back at him. "You don't have to keep doing that," she said. "I know," he replied. "I want—" He walked to the fence and lifted the loose rail, fitting it back into place with slow, steady movements. Some things didn't need fixing all at once. Some just needed hands willing to stay. "You didn't save me," Sarah said after a while. "You just stopped me from being erased." Jack paused, then nodded once. That's usually enough. She thought about the mission, about rules dressed up as faith, about how obedience had been used like a cage she'd learned to decorate from the inside. She had a choice now. That frightened her more than the rope ever had. "They'll still talk," she said. "They always do," Jack replied. "But they'll remember too." Sarah watched the river again. "I don't know who I am without being told." "You'll figure it out," he said. "No one does it clean." The morning settled around them. No promises spoken. No plans laid out. Just space where fear used to live. The quiet that followed wasn't empty anymore. It felt earned. The days kept moving, the way days always did, but Sarah noticed how differently she moved inside them now. She stood straighter without meaning to. She spoke without rehearsing every word first. Some habits took longer to fade, but they no longer owned her. When doubt crept in, it didn't sound like God anymore. It sounded like fear. And fear, she was learning, could be faced. One afternoon, she walked back toward the mission alone. Not to return, not to confront, just to see it without being small. The doors were still shut. The walls looked the same, but the power they once held over her was gone. She stood there for a moment, then turned away. That was enough. Back at the ranch, Jack watched her cross the yard, moving with a confidence that hadn't been there before. He didn't comment on it. He learned that real change didn't need witnesses. It just needed room. "You staying?" he asked later, not casual, not careful, just honest. "For now," she said. Then she smiled. "This time it's my choice." That night, they sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in tired colors. No promises were made. No future was named. Some things grew better without being forced into shape. The town would keep talking. It always would. But stories lost their teeth when the people inside them refused to live by fear. The preacher had used the word forbidden to keep others obedient. Jack had crossed that line not for desire, not for pride, but because looking away felt worse than being judged. And that was the truth Sarah carried with her. Sometimes the right thing looks wrong from a distance. Sometimes help looks suspicious. Sometimes the hand that reaches in is accused before it's understood. But intention matters. Choice matters. And courage is rarely clean or comfortable. Most people weren't evil. They were just quiet when silence was easier. Change didn't come from being perfect. It came from refusing to look away. Sarah learned that faith wasn't about obedience without thought. It was about standing upright, even when others told you to bow. Jack learned that innocence wasn't proven by avoiding trouble, but by facing it when it mattered. And maybe that was the lesson left behind for anyone watching. When something feels forbidden, ask why. When a line is drawn, ask who benefits from it. And when someone reaches out in the middle of confusion, don't judge the hand too quickly. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is look closer, even when everyone else tells them not to.